So, excuse me everyone. Good morning. Apologies lang kasi we did not have our synchronous learning session yesterday because there was an emergency meeting. Regardless, so welcome back to our actually third synchronous learning session. So for today, we'll be focusing on module 2 on the eyes, nose, and mouth. So reminders lang before we begin. For this one, as you're going to look at the module, if you've seen the module, it's more or less a step-by-step process on how to do your eyes, your nose, and mouth in three different views. So you have your front view, your side view, and your three-fourth view. So medyo mahaba siya. However, if you're going to see yung sa may quiz natin or yung sa may activity, it's actually a quiz. So with this one, more or less the knowledge that you have, or it's not really necessary for you to actually learn this one immediately. However, it is important for you to understand yung basic proportions and the basic shapes that is necessary for you to be able to create some of these different body parts in different views. Also, it's also within your free time, it is quite important for you to also practice them. So even though na hindi siya part ng quiz ninyo, it's still quite important for you to look at them, try to draw them, because these will be intended for the other performance tasks. So for your module 4, hindi na sasabihin kung paano nyo idodrawing tong mga to. It's more or less, it's going to go in with the assumption na alam nyo na yung gagawin ninyo. So with that one, it's quite important for you to still practice this one regardless. So for today, we're going to not really focus so much on the module. Instead, I'm going to mostly focus on the application for these ones. So I have right here off screen or off camera, I have my tablet over here. And for today, I'll be using digital art. So for you guys, you're not really allowed to use digital art. But for the sake of this demonstration, I'll be using Paint Tool site. So for this one, expected na ang gagamitin ninyo is pencil and paper. So there are some things that might not necessarily translate properly right here compared to, like, let's say if you were to do it on actual pencil and paper. So with that one, there might be some things that are a little bit more clear to me that won't necessarily translate to you, pero we'll try to make it so that those things are irrelevant. So with this one, let's start off first with the first page. So on solid drawing and perspective drawing. So for solid drawing and perspective drawing, essentially, we're just going to focus on the idea of solid drawing, which is the idea of understanding that every shape that is drawn in paper is something that is three-dimensional, and even though when two dimensions are only typically viewed. Essentially kasi when you're doing, of course, drawing, you want to make sure that something is drawn 3D, even though that your medium, which is two-dimensional, is that it only has two dimensions. And most of the time, what will only be viewed is two dimensions. However, there is still an understanding na beyond the two dimensions, you still have your other views. Solid drawing now is applied through something which we call as perspective drawing. Perspective drawing is essentially the technique of illustrating three-dimensional objects into a two-dimensional space. So essentially, it's just an application of solid drawing. Basically, how you're going to illustrate solid drawing and perspective drawing is for you to be able to illustrate an object or character into different views. So for this one, even though na, like, let's say you're not really showing something three-dimensional, even though it's two-dimensional, having these different views can do the following. So number one, it can help the different views. Having the different views rather can help stitch the entire character to the minds of the illustrators or audiences. So even though, like, let's say you don't really see the front view and the side view at the same time, you can kind of have the idea that the character has front views and side views, and in that way you kind of get the feeling that a character is three-dimensional. If you just see a character as something na puro front view lang or puro side view lang, then that might give also the impression that your character is only two-dimensional. Kasi you don't really see every other view. And of course, helping them feel three-dimensional makes it so that they're a bit more immersive, even though na, like, let's say you're having a character that doesn't necessarily exist in reality. So how we do perspective drawing is through the use of front, side, and three-fourth views. There are other views, of course, like let's say your back view, your three-fourth back view, pero ito yung mostly na ginagamit natin. So why is there a necessity for you to have front, side, and three-fourth views? Bakit hindi pwedeng front view lang tapos three-fourth view lang? So these ones essentially can help you stitch already or give you an idea of what the entire body is without entirely rotating everything. So it would be much better for you technically to have your back view and your three-fourth view, as well as two types of side views and then two types of three-fourth views. However, this one would mostly suffice. It's basically the minimum requirements for you to be able to give the impression of a 3D character. So your main views are your front view. So this is where your character faces directly to the viewer or to the camera. And usually this is the main basis for the other views. So like when you're creating your character or when you're constructing your character, you would usually have a front view as, let's say, the main drawing first. O kaya naman sometimes it's also three-fourths, but mostly it's front view. We also have a side view. So the side view, essentially the character or the object faces away from the camera to see only the side. So you would only see the side profile of the character. Sometimes you might see in other books the side view be called as a profile view, which is essentially the same. So this is important because there are a lot of things in the side view that is not necessarily captured by the front view. So we tend to have two types of side views. So the one that's facing towards the left and the other one that's facing towards the right. So for this one, ang gagamitin natin for our module is the one facing towards the left. Pero essentially, the steps that you'll be seeing right here can be applied to the one facing towards the right. Although you have to do some changes, particularly with flipping the flipping, like let's say the instructions. And then lastly, for the three-fourth view, so the three-fourth is essentially the intersection between the front view and the side view. So this is where kind of the stitching happens. So if you don't have your three-fourth view, like yeah, you have your front view and your side view, but we don't really understand as viewers how those two views can be connected to each other. So the three-fourth view kind of does that purpose. So three-fourth view is essentially the object or the character is facing 45 degrees away from the camera. So what happens right here is that it has essences of the front view, particularly one half of the three-fourth view. The one that's closer towards the camera is that it has exactly the same proportions as a front view. However, the one that is facing away towards the camera tends to be a bit more squished or a bit more morphed to make it smaller. But in terms of height, they are still the same. There are actually a lot of types of three-fourths, so according to the angle. So there is a three-fourth that is facing 50 degrees, facing 30 degrees, pero essentially we'll just focus on 45 degrees. And also according to the direction where they are dominantly facing, so either left or right. So for this one, in your module, you have essentially 9 views. So you have your eyes in front, side, and three-fourth. You have your nose in front, side, and three-fourth, and you have your mouth in front, side, and three-fourth. So I'll be removing this off screen muna for you to be able to see on how we're going to construct some of these things. So the first thing that I'll be doing is I'll be creating a new file. So you don't really have to do this. Yeah, let's have quite a short one. Okay, there you go. So for today, I'll be talking to you how we're going to do yung front view na eyes and then three-fourth view na eyes. So I'll be skipping the side view because that's quite quick. And then we'll be doing the nose in front view, side view, and three-fourth view. And then for the mouth for front view and then three-fourth view. If we have time for the side, we'll try to do some of the side. So for this one, I'll be using, yeah, paint tool side. Medyo pencil yung, yeah, it kind of looks like a pencil so that it would be quite the same. Let me just increase the lightness of the brush so that it's more visible. So hopefully nakikita siya. Please let me know na lang sa may chat kung hindi siya masyadong nakikita so that we can adjust immediately. Okay, I guess this is fine. But essentially, for when we're going to do our front view for the eyes, a lot of the common mistakes kasi ang ginagawa ng first-time artists is that they're going to draw the eye separately. So they'll be doing the right eye or they'll just be doing one eye na naka-front view. So it does a lot of things. So number one is that when you're only drawing one eye, of course, you're not practicing the other eye. Tendency kasi is that for a lot of people, they tend to focus on just one eye. So they would draw the right eye, but they won't really do the left eye. And that would do some effects in terms of how you would do the angle. So like let's say when you're constantly doing the right eye, medyo nasasanay ka sa ganitong hand stroke, pero hindi ka sanay sa ganitong hand stroke. So parang immediately you can kind of see na hindi sila magkapantay. So another thing is of course hindi sila magiging pantay. So you would not have so much experience with drawing the right eye compared to that of the left eye. So it's quite important na when you're starting off to draw, it's much better for you to draw both eyes at the same time. So with that one, ito yung approach na ginamit natin dito. For this activity, you would see a lot of lines. So itong mga lines na to, these are guidelines and basic shapes, and that's the one that we would really like to focus on this module. Not necessarily how to do the rendering, but that one is also as equally important. Pero kasi when you're doing a lot of rendering, it takes a lot of, or it varies from person to person. So with this one, once you have your proportions and basic shapes down, essentially you can do whichever type of eye you would like to do. So let's start. Pinakauna is that I'll be starting off with this line over here. So ito yung horizontal line natin. It basically comes across the page. So for me, it would be easier for me sa digital to just create one line, one swooping line. For you guys, if you would like to use a ruler, that would be okay as well. If you would like to just create smaller lines na parang pag ganito, that's also fine as well, pero try to minimize it as much as possible. Next one, at the very center, we will be creating a circle. So itong circle na to, try to make sure na yung halves nila are magkapantay. So it should be sitting towards the middle of the circle. Also, if you would need to, it might be a bit more possible if you would like to draw the circle first, pwede naman siya, and then draw the line later. So that would be also possible. And then, afterwards, you have right here, again, yung paggawa ng circle natin, it doesn't really have to be perfect. The only thing that's necessary is for you to make sure that the width and then the height are the same. So itong measurement na to, it's also the same as the height measurement. How rounded it is, you can make it a little bit better if necessary, but you don't have to take so much time with making it as round as possible. So as long as it vaguely resembles a circle, okay naman na siya. And then from that point on, ito yung medyo nahihirapan for first-time beginners, is that you would have to draw the circle. Basically, ito-trace mo yung circle mo towards the right side and towards the left side. So, yeah, medyo may napapansin ako since I'm using digital, it's quite easy for me to kind of undo a lot of the things that I'm doing right now, which is not necessarily you're able to do something for traditional. So for this one, pwede nyong gamitin yung eraser if you need to. Pero try to minimize again the use of our eraser. I'm just doing a lot of undo. Number one, force of habit. Number two, para hindi siya masyadong crowded later on when we're doing a lot of the rendering and everything else. So it's really important for you to make sure that your circles are of the same height. So if you can create like this horizontal line before you begin, that would be much better. So make sure na yung heights nila is magkakaparehas, more or less. Make sure also that the halves are equal. So that one is a little bit more important compared to actually creating the heights. So also please make sure that the widths, how wide the circles are the same. So if you would need to copy paste, that would be something that you might be able to do. Also, if you would need to use a ruler, please use it only to double check. Huwag nyo naman gamitin na like, let's say, okay, this is 1 inch na circle na width. So dapat ito exactly 1 inch, exactly 1 inch. Try to practice for yourself to kind of eyeball it, o kaya naman use the measurements without strictly using a ruler. Kasi once you do, like let's say na sanay kayo na gumamit ng ruler, later on when you're doing more fluid sketches, more perspective shots, medyo may hirapan kayo. So for this one, if you would need to counter check yung measurements ninyo and if you don't have a ruler, you can always use your fingers naman. So you can try and measure, use your thumb to kind of like find the width of or the end of one circle, your pinky can be for the other circle so that maipantay-pantay mo siya. So you can always use your fingers to kind of like measure yourself. I mean, measure yung mga different parts of your body. You can also use your pencil if necessary, pero mostly ang ginagamit namin is yun nga, yung fingers. Next one is that you're going to create a straight line down the middle of the center of the circle. So make sure na yung paghati natin is more or less equal. From that point on, let's just focus on this line right here, yung heights natin dito. And then from that point on, hahatiin nyo siya into 3 equal parts. So itong line na to. It might be a bit confusing for you guys sometimes kasi may isang linya dito, pero it should be independent for now. So dapat yung measurements natin dito, dito, tapos dito, dapat equal siya. Doesn't have to be perfect again, pero at least make sure na they can be a bit bigger or smaller every now and then, pero make sure na at least they should be as equal as possible. From this point on, we're going to now extend these parts right here. So try to create horizontal lines. So from the right side and from the left side. Okay. So this one is basically 1/3. So 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 to. It's really important that you only use 1/3 of the size of the circle. So for this one, essentially itong circle na to, this represents your eyeballs. Pero if you actually think about it, you don't really see your entire eyeball outside of your face. You only see a portion of it. Usually it's around 1/3, actually 1/4 for a little bit more realism. Pero 1/3 is the one that we're going to use for today, so that you would be able to create more expression. So that's another important thing when you're looking into proportions or when you're looking into constructing your own style. So the one that is shown right here is more for Marvel, more for DC, and also for animation. So when you're using or when you're animating kasi or when you're doing comic books, an important aspect for you to show emotion is the eyes. So with that one, it's you would see a lot of comic books or a lot of animations that would really emphasize the eyes. That's mostly the reason. So you have, again, 1/3 of the size of the circle as your eye. So we also have 3 circles right here, which I forgot to mention. So the 2 ones at the sides, that's actually your eyes. And then itong nasa gitna, this is just the space in between your eyes. Bakit circle siya? It is because the size of or the spacing between your eyes is equivalent to one eye. So if you're going to measure your own eyes, try to find yung width ng mata mo and then try to measure it with the center of your eyes. It's mostly the same. So basically, I have now all of my I have all of my basic shapes. I have all of my measurements. Now I can then move on to my rendering. So for the rendering process, you can use a darker tone pencil. So for me, para medyo mag-differentiate sila, I'll be using a darker shade of a color. So for this one, let's start off with the upper lid. So for the upper lid, this is how I do it. It's not necessarily the correct one. You can kind of even modify it this if you would like to, pero essentially, this is how I would like to do it so that the eyes look a bit more appealing. So you have here yung center natin. You have your horizontal line right here. Medyo ilagay nyo siya sa baba. Konti lang. So you have to do it on both sides. So you have here yung center circle mo, you do it both at the sides. So this is like the start of your eyes where your tear duct is. And then at the edges of the end circles, you would place it now dead center on the horizontal line. So medyo ina-adjust ko lang dito kasi hindi siya pantay. So with this one, the ones at the center should be a bit lower compared to the ones at the sides. And then You can probably create another point, a third point, but it's not really necessary. But it's just for you to kind of like connect the dots a bit easier. So find the center point right here, find the center point right here, so that you would be able to connect them with creating your upper eyelid. So when you're creating your upper eyelid, try to look at how I've created it on the right side. So masanay kasi ako on the right side. So for this one, you could see that I started at the center, then pataas, and then going downwards. When you're doing it on the other eye, probably some of you might be tempted to do it like this. So magsa-start sila sa may gilid and then connect it with the top and then connect it with the bottom. So that's not really something that's recommended. If you can start and train yourself na magsa-start din kayo sa may gitna and then going upwards and then going downwards as well, that would be a bit better for you. Kasi yun nga, so that magiging parehas siya. Again, we will be focusing on the importance of drawing the eyes, drawing two eyes at the same time. So whenever you're doing this, it's quite important that you start off with the same steps for both eyes. So probably some of you, what you would do is you would start off first with the right eye and then afterwards with the left eye or vice versa, which is not something that we're supposed to do. Ang focus lang dapat talaga natin is more of like creating both steps for the following reasons. Number one, if you're doing it at the same time, you can immediately correct it if ever may hindi tama. So if ever nagko-correct kayo, it would already be resolved at the earliest stage, so you don't have to correct it later on. Because if you're going to correct it later on, tendency is that once na kinarek mo yung left eye, okay, suddenly yung right eye, hindi siya pantay. So I'll correct the right eye and then pabalik-balik kayo up until the point na hindi na kayo natapos o kaya naman the eyes would be warped so much that you'll have to repeat yourself. So another one is that it maintains consistency a bit better when you're doing both eyes at the same time. So you have both of these lines. Probably I can make this a bit better. For me to be able to do that, I might just want to make this a bit thicker. Yeah, for this one as well, you might want to make this a bit thicker as well. So the reason why we're thickening the upper eyelid right here is that you don't really have to draw eyelashes anymore. So if you see a lot of like, let's say, cartoon animations, Japanese animations, you would notice that the upper eyelid is always thicker compared to that of the lower eyelid, so that we essentially eliminate the need for you to draw eyelashes. So that's a lot more work in terms of a animation or even a comic book perspective. Next one is, ang gagawin ko ngayon is I'll be creating the tear ducts. So yung sa may tear ducts ko, I'm creating essentially, let me just zoom in a little bit, is that this shape. Para siyang curved na V shape. So for this one, I'll be doing it right here. Sa may left side muna. Okay, it's just really small. So you connect it with your upper eyelid and then you stop around where your horizontal line is for the lower part and then again for the left side. Make sure na medyo pantay sila. So if you were to notice, medyo mag-e-exceed siya towards, medyo mag-e-exceed siya. That's quite alright. If you would just like to stay within the circle, that's also quite alright. Pero pag like, let's say, masyadong, nag-exceed ka from the circle, it's not something that's really recommended. So medyo paliitin lang natin ng konti. And then, let me just zoom out a little bit. Okay. So from this point on, I'm going to now create my lower eyelids. So for my lower eyelids, I'll be starting off with my tear duct and then again, sa may gitna for my lowest point of the eye, and then I'll be connecting it right here. I'll be doing the same thing on the left side. Also, probably another thing that you might want to do is for you to, like let's say nag-start ka sa may upper eyelid sa may right side. On the next time for the lower eyelid, you might want to start off with the left side first. So, yeah, you have this line right here. Yeah, if you're noticing also, medyo parang may pagka-curve yung lines natin. So, it's kind of like the swooping motion. Medyo tataas siya dito. So, this is something that you can do if you can just, so that it looks a little bit more appealing. Or if you just want to create it straight down, that's also quite fine. So creating these different curves, as you may know already, or probably when you're into checking yung, or like let's say when you're looking into how you're supposed to draw, you might have seen for the human body, we don't really have a lot of straight lines. So with that respect, it's really not recommended for you to draw strictly straight lines. As much as possible, if you can curve them, you can try to do that as well. So medyo mababa to. Let me just correct it a little bit. Okay. So I guess that's the best thing that we can do for now. So you have both of your both you have your upper and lower eyelids. So essentially, you already should have a closed shape. So pag hindi pa rin siya closed, then that's, you have to make sure that it's closed. And then, sa may sides niya, I'll be closing the tear duct. So dapat medyo maliit lang siya. And then the next part. So for the next part, I'll be creating another layer because this is something that I have to explain separately. So essentially, for me to be able to do the iris, which is the next point, is that I need to kind of see yung size ng eye natin. So when you're creating your circle for the iris, essentially what you will be doing is you'll be creating a circle. Tapos itong circle na to is that medyo itataas nyo siya ng konti so that once you have the final output, you essentially have this curved line over here. So parang itataas nyo lang siya ng konti, then you're just going to trace over it. And then the next step is that medyo i-curve nyo siya. So medyo ipapaloob nyo pa siya ng konti so that it looks a little bit more convincing. So I'll be doing that one on the right side, or sorry, on the left side as well. So again, I'm just creating a circle. Itong circle na to is more or less cut. Okay, so probably I would like to also change this to make it a bit bigger. Another common mistake kasi is that a lot of students tend to make wala masyadong or they would not have enough space here. Some of them might have so much space here. So parang masyadong maliit yung iris. So that's something that we have to remember as well. Next portion is that I'll be creating my by the way pala yung irises din pala natin should be at the center of the eye. Next one for the pupils, I'll just be creating these big dots. So, try to make them a little bit bigger. Hindi siya yung parang dot lang na ganyan. Pag ganyan lang siya, it looks too small. Pero pag again, masyado siyang malaki, then that might be a bit overkill. If you were to ask me, it would be better for you to make your pupils a bit bigger than they should be. At least yun, it still looks convincing as eyes. Pero pag dot lang talaga, or it's too thin, or it's too small, then it doesn't really look convincing as an eye. So you have now both of your eyes. So the next step is an optional step, pero again, this is more of an aesthetic appeal type of thing, wherein I'll be drawing the upper eyelids. You don't really have to do this, or essentially, if you would like to do it, is that you're just going to draw a thin line over the top of the upper eyelid. So essentially, parang tinatrace mo lang yung shape niya. There should be a little bit of space in between them. Okay, so you have something like this. And then the next portion is that I'll be creating the eyebrows. So for the eyebrows, I'll go back to my smaller or lighter sized brush for me to be able to explain this. So for this part, I'll be creating 3 points. So when you're creating your eyebrows, regardless if it's more a feminine or more of a masculine type of eyebrow, I'll be creating 3 points. So you have your lowest point, your highest point, and then kind of like your middle point. So the first point right here, dapat naka-intersect siya sa may tear duct natin dito, and the highest point of the circle. So it would probably be right around here. I would do it for both eyes. The next portion is a bit tricky, but essentially it should be aligned with, you have this iris over here, yung nasa may pinakagilid niya. And then how high it is, it depends on you. So if you want a really high arched eyebrow, then you can do something like that. If you don't want to, then pwedeng medyo babaan ninyo. And then for the third part, it's aligned essentially with the edges of your eyes right here. And then like let's say the width for this one is essentially kung nasaan yung kalahati ng dalawang lines na to. So the height for the first line is here, the height for the second line is right around here. So essentially hahanapin mo yung gitna, it's right around here. Then trace it or align it to the edge of the eye. So it's now right here. Again, hanapin ninyo yung gitna nila. Then kind of find the middle point right here. So should be right about there. So that's where your eyebrows is going to be. So for this one, I'll be creating a more masculine eyebrow. So for your more masculine eyebrow, you tend to have a lot more, like let's say angle towards the shape. So for this one, for the first point, I won't be starting on this point itself. Medyo itataas ko siya ng konti. And then I'll be connecting it with a little bit higher again to the second point. And then connecting it to the second point dead on the third point. Kasi this is like your last point right here. So you have right here this triangular shape. So it should be sharp in terms of its angles. And then the next portion is medyo ibababa ko from the first point. And then I'll be creating this swooping line. So itong line na to, it should be a bit curved. Pero again, if you're going to notice it, it's like just a straight diagonal line. Medyo curved lang siya ng konti. So if you're going to close this shape, so i-close ko lang siya, you can see right here na parang this point, the first point and the second point are almost the same. Sometimes the second point would be the thickest, which is really important. For the third point, it should just really be like this point right here. So I would be doing the same on the other eye. Would be much better if you were to actually create the lines separately so that they look the same. Then you have this point. Then again, start at this point, create your swooping line. Then close the shape. So now you have your final eyes. From this point on, essentially the only thing that you have to do is to erase everything. So you just have to erase yung guidelines ninyo. Try your best not to erase all of them. So try to carefully erase if necessary. For your activities next time, you're actually not allowed to remove your guidelines. So para makita ko if you're using the proper steps. Kasi there would be some who would just trace or sometimes just draw over it. So yeah, dapat walang guidelines. Also, when you're erasing especially, it's not really 100% na matatanggal yung guidelines regardless of what you do. So you would still see some portions of guidelines, which is good to see kasi you're able to use the basic shapes. And again, it's for you to make sure na okay yung measurements natin. So yeah, that's how your eyes should essentially look like. Again, really important for you to have your guidelines. If you don't need to remove your guidelines, please don't. Kasi yun nga, para makita na ginagamit din siya talaga. So now I have my front view for the eyes. So that's essentially how you're going to do it. Since wala tayong masyadong time, I'll be moving on to the nose already. So for the nose naman, I'll make a new canvas na lang. So for the nose, the one that I'll be doing for today is more of a 3/4. I'll be doing more of the side view para makita ninyo on how, kasi when you're doing your nose, for the front view, actually ang gagawin nyo lang is more of something like this. Actually, sometimes you don't even need the basic shapes. So essentially, ang gagawin nyo lang is more of the nose bridge, the nose tip, the nostrils right here, and then the base or the edges of the nose. You don't really need a nose bridge. So, ang gagawin natin for today is more of like this side view. type of nose. So for your nose, you first start off by you can start off by creating a line. So itong horizontal line na to, it would be at the very bottom. Again, try to make it as horizontal as possible. Next one is I'll be creating a circle. So yung circle na to, it doesn't have to be as big as yung sa may eyes natin. Kasi when you're going to do it as big as the eyes, you won't have space for the height. So again, please make sure that your height and your width are the same. And then next one is that you will be creating a circle towards the side. Itong circle na to, it should be a bit smaller but not too small. So I would say probably around 75% of the size. So for you to kind of create this one, you can do something a little bit more complicated like this. So if you were to divide the circle right here, hanapin ninyo yung 3/4 niya. So this is 1/2. And then hatiin nyo ulit dito. So this is 75%. And then at this point, ito yung gagamitin ko for the height of my second circle. So I would try to make the circle as close to the other circle as possible. So now you have a smaller circle. Again, make sure that the width and the height are the same. Nextly is that I will be creating a vertical line. So itong vertical line na to, I would place it right here on the side of the circle, or the smaller circle rather. Again, please make sure that it is as straight as possible, pero if it's not, as long as it's able to do its job. Wag naman yung super diagonal. Next part is I'm going to now measure the height of my circle right here. So I can just do something like this. So now it's aligned with this vertical line right here. From this point on, I'm now going to find the measurement of this. So once na nahanap ko yung measurement nito, I will now be creating the same measurement twice sa may taas. So another measurement right here and another measurement right here. So dapat pantay sila. Again, you can use your ruler to double check. You can use also your fingers to double check. So if you just use your fingers, it's much faster compared to that of the ruler. So now I have this line over here. I have this horizontal line over here. So an important part when you're creating the side view of your nose is that you have your nose bridge. For you to be able to complete that nose bridge, you need to have, of course, a triangle as kind of like your basis for the basic shape. So for me to be able to do that, I'll be creating a triangle starting off from the topmost point that I have right here up until dapat it should hit the tangent of my circle. So kind of like around this point where it hits or where it's the same level as that of your smaller circle right here. And then I'm just gonna go for it. Kind of like yan. So it should be able to hit this point right here, only one point of the circle. And then pwede nyo siyang i-extend for a little bit for you to actually see the triangle. So I have now this triangle over here, which will be the basis of my rendering. So now let's move on to the rendering process. So I'll be starting off, I think ang nakalagay sa notes is 1/2 of this smaller circle right here. So I'll be making this measurement over here. And then I'll be creating first one line. So itong line na to, actually medyo pa ganun yung movement niya, and it should be aligned to this line right here, or it should end to this line right here, and it should be aligned to the highest point of the circle. From this point on, I'll be creating the rest of my nose bridge. So for the rest of my nose bridge, I'll be starting off here, and then I'll try to reconnect with the nose or with the triangle as much as possible. So from this point, I'll be creating this swooping motion. Then i-connect ko siya with the triangle. So please do not parang paganyan siya. You can actually do something like this, pero as much as possible, minimize natin itong point dito. So try to connect with the triangle as quickly as possible, kind of like. And then once you're connected already, all you have to do is to trace. So this is already your nose bridge. So, yung sa may nose bridge ninyo, you can kind of change this. So, kung medyo like, let's say, pango yung character ninyo, I'll be creating another layer. You can also kind of place it right here. Para pag nag-render kayo, you can have like this smaller of a circle. If you want it like really sharp, probably you might want to create the line right here para talagang ma-emphasize yung nose bridge. Pero for us, we'll just be using right around here. And then, from this point on, I can just essentially trace my circle right here. Around this point, around half of where the big circle is, you might want to create a smaller point right here. So, parang paganyan siya before you start curving again. So that para may shape naman yung nose ninyo. And then, trace the circle up until it meets yung, like, let's say, meeting point ng bigger circle and that of the smaller circle right here. So there you go. So trace ko lang siya. Trace the entire circle. You stop right around here. And then at this point, I'm going to now create the nostrils. So for the nostrils, you will be creating like these hook things. So parang paganyan lang siya. Let me just create another layer. Essentially, paganyan yung shape niya. So it's like you're creating a hook. Medyo bababa ka, then tataas, then paganon. So for that one, I'll be starting a little bit lower, and then I'll be ending towards where the half of the circle is. So it would be around here. And then for the edge of the circle right here is that I'll be starting off a bit higher. And ang shape na gagawin ko is kind of like this half teardrop shape. So again, I'll be recreating this one. So, usually kasi ang common mistake is that for the side of the nose, ang ginagawa nila is masyado siyang pabilog, pag ganyan. When in reality, it should be more of like this shape. So, if I were to exaggerate it, it looks like this. If it were a bit subtler, it would be more of like this. So, think about it more as like this half teardrop shape. So, itong half teardrop shape na to is like you're going to create a teardrop. Yeah, you're going to create a teardrop. And then, pag hahatiin mo siya, you essentially have the side of the nose. So, you can do something like that for this one over here. Then, by the end, pwede nyo na siyang essentially i-trace yung nose. So, from this point on, you can now again use your eraser. Erase it really carefully because there's a lot of there's a lot of guidelines right here. So, with that now, all of those gone, you now essentially have the side view of your nose. So that's how you would create yung basic shapes using your nose. So for this one, if you're not really able to understand it too much, I have recorded this synchronous learning session. So again, you can kind of just look it up later on. Also, we have your notes with you. So, kung medyo mabilis siya, apologies na lang talaga kasi we don't really have a lot of time. My main point right here is that it's necessary for you to have your basic shapes for you to be able to create parts of your eyes, your nose, and mouth. If you don't have your proper proportions, you don't have your proper shapes, tendency is that hindi magandang tignan yung gagawin ninyong output. So, with that one, it's really important for you to be able to practice. Practice, understand the modules, practice it as much as possible. Draw within your sketchbook or sketchpad within your free time, even though na hindi siya required as of now. But it will be required later on. So with that one, kailangan nyo talagang mag-start as early as now. So that is for the creation of the nose. So the last part is we still have a few minutes left. For me, I'll be creating again yung sa may mouth. So yung sa may mouth naman, I'll be creating the 3/4. So we have the front view for the eyes, we have the side view for the nose. For this one, I'll be creating the 3/4 for the mouth so that it's quite fair. So the first part for the mouth 3/4 is I'll be creating again another horizontal line. itong horizontal line na to, it has to be as straight as possible. Pero if it's not, as long as hindi naman siya masyadong diagonal, it's quite alright. Next portion is I'll be dividing this a little bit more so that parang I would be able to create my entire shape. So for this one, I'll be creating one circle dito sa may baba. So itong circle na to, ito yung magiging measurement ko. So I'll be placing a measurement here and another measurement here for me to be able to create one measurement. And then, itong circle na to or itong measurement na to, I'll be replicating it towards the side. So, one more here. Again, make sure na pantay sila. And then, one more right here. So, I have 3 measurements of that circle. So, the next part is, actually, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 measurements right here. Yung pangalawa, try to make it a bit longer so that you can kind of understand that this is your half line. Or this is the half of the mouth. So at this point, this is where your right side is. This is where your left side is. So this is a common aspect of 3/4. You would see that for the right side or the one that's facing towards the camera more, this is more the same as yung sa may front view ninyo. So if you were to do the eyes, it's very much similar to how you would do the eyes for the right side normally. On the left side, however, the one that's farther away from the camera, you would be able to see that it is squished. Almost 50% ang difference nila. So you would have the measurement right here, twice the measurement naman sa may right side. So that's something that's quite normal. Itong division na to, hatiin pa natin ng isa pang beses so that we would have 4 measurements. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Pero ito magkakapantay, and now you have the center right here. So at this point now, I'll be using this same circle and then I'll be recreating it right here. So dapat more or less same yung measurements nila. If you've created the circle right around here or pag hinati nyo siya right around here, that would be much better. And then, you have now the circle right here. Itong circle na to, hahanapin natin yung base niya. So, it's right here specifically. And then, I'll be using this measurement right here. Itong space na to. So, I'll be creating more of a rectangle para kind of like makita ninyo. And then, create an ellipse. So, by the way, if I'm using term or when you're going to take the quiz, there are some terms that might be confusing for you guys. So, just a quick rundown. The common terms that you would see as shapes pala in terms of the module right here are the following. So, you have your circle, you have your ellipse, you have your rectangle, you have your square, then you have your triangle. Pero that's something that's quite the same. Okay. So for these ones, yung circle natin is of course ganito. Make sure na yung width and height are basically the same. For your ellipse is essentially kind of like this rounded object. So yung ellipse natin can be more it can be a bit more elongated, it could be more like this, it can even be more like this. It can even be an actual circle. So when we say ellipse, an example of an ellipse is a circle. So probably when you're looking into quizzes, you might see the term ellipse that would sometimes include the circle. Pero not all ellipses would be a circle. Hindi siya pwedeng paganyan, pero ito pwede siya. Next one is we have our square. So yung square natin, alam naman natin that the width should be the same as the height. Yung rectangle, similar din, pwedeng pahaba, pwedeng trapezoid, pwedeng yung ganitong type of shape. Essentially, even a square is an example of a rectangle. So if you refer a square as a rectangle, that's correct. Or if you refer a square as a rectangle, that's not really correct. So with that one, you might also be able to see some questions na, for example, what is the shape that is used to create the basic, I mean, what is the basic shape that was used to create an eye? If there are no choices for circle, pero there's a choice for ellipse, then probably it would be more of an ellipse. Similar then when we're talking about rectangles or squares. Yung triangle naman natin, essentially it can be anything. It can be more of this equilateral, isosceles, you have your right triangle. All of those ones are essentially the same. Wala namang other terms for the triangle. It's just more of the ellipse and circle, rectangle and square. So sorry for the tangent. Let's go back to creating your mouth shape. So for this one, okay. So an important part right here is that in terms of height for the 3/4, yung height natin, it should always be the same. So the height for the circle right here and the height of the ellipse right here is the same. However, the widths are different. So dun sila nagkakaiba. Sa width sila nagkakaiba, hindi necessarily sa height. And then, as you can see, the base is essentially the same. The height is essentially the same, or yung width is different. So now we're going to move on towards the circle up here. So for you to be able to create the circle right here, it's a little bit of an anomaly. Pero essentially, hahanapin nyo yung heights nito or yung kalahati nila. So for this ellipse right here, it should be around here. For this circle right here, it should be right around here. The height should be the same. So you can kind of create this height right here. So if you were to create a rectangle, it kind of looks like this. And with that one, makakagawa ka na ng circle. So itong circle na to, it would essentially be more of like this semicircle, similar to this one. Ito naman, medyo warp ng konti. So if we were to isolate it, it kind of like looks more like this. So this is more of like a 3/4 type of circle. So yeah, now we have, I think, all of our basic shapes. Yeah, we have one more basic shape for this one. Hahatiin lang natin to into 2 parts. So you have this one right here. Now let's move on to the rendering process. Okay, so for the rendering process, we tend to start off first with the mouth right here. So we tend to start off by creating this small V shape. So itong V shape na to, what you can do with this one is to essentially trace yung bottom of the circle but make it a bit more curved. So parang U or kind of like this V shape siya. Again, make sure that the thickness or the width for this one is much wider compared to this one right here. So paghahatiin mo siya, would be right around here. Let me just zoom in a little bit. Essentially, it looks like this. Paghahatiin mo, you would see that the width right here is much shorter compared to the width right here. Again, and then for the next part is that I'll be creating these curved lines na paganyan. So it's upturn or downturned line. So medyo nakababa siya. So these lines again, please make sure na yung height nila in terms of how curvy it is, it's still the same. Pero for this one, we stop at the edge of the circle. For this one, we stop at the edge of the ellipse. And then from this point on, up until the last portion, is that I'll be creating more of an upturned smile. So kind of like try to make it paganyan. Then pwede rin na paganyan. If you want to make that the character is frowning, ang gagawin lang natin is that ibababa niyong paganyan, then continue nyo lang siyang ibaba so that the character is frowning. For this one, it has a bit more of a natural smile. Next one is we're going to go up here. Tataas natin ng konti. So around up here, same measurement. For this one, ito mas curved naman siya. Mas obvious yung curve niya. Ito medyo subtle lang yung curve natin. So I'll be ending around the sides right here, the ends of the circle and the ellipse right here. And then create more of like this curved diagonal line for you to make sure na mako-close yung shape natin. So here you have your upper lip. Now we have the lower lip. So usually yung upper lip natin, pwede pa natin itong i-adjust. So if you want a thinner lip, pwede siyang mga around 1/4 right here. We don't really have thicker, we don't really do so much of a thicker lip. So if you want it a bit thicker, it can be right here. Can even be right here as high as this one. Pero as much as possible sana around half the shape. For the lower lip naman, same din. You can go as thick as the entire shape of the circle. Pero for me, I'll be placing it a bit higher. So right around here. So you can kind of vary the thicknesses of the lips, but what's important is the proportion of your upper lip to that of your lower lip. So yung sa may upper lip ninyo, it's very important that your upper lip is around the same thickness or should be thinner compared to that of your lower lip. So if it's a bit thinner right here, so like let's say this is your upper lip, your lower lip would be around here, it doesn't really look natural. So it should be at least around here, or it can be a bit lower. So I'll be probably having it right around here. So for this one, for me to be able to create the shape of my lower lip, I'll be tracing this point over here. So parang itatrace ko lang to. Then, make it a bit subtler. So parang paganyan. And then, itataas ko siya dito. So parang may curve pa rin siya. Or parang medyo napapansin nyo na medyo plump pa rin yung lips, pero it's not that exaggerated. So, yung sa may mouth natin or yung sa may lips natin, really, it focuses more on making your lines curved para nagmumukha siyang lips, pero at the same time, it should still be a little bit subtle because if you overdraw or if you overextend the curviness of the lips, then it doesn't really look good because the lips already are as curvy. It's already as curvy as it can get. Then from this point on, essentially, I'll just be tracing again yung circle natin or the bottom of the circle. So if you kind of like trace this one, tapos itaas nyo, it's the same thing. And then I'll be ending around these points right here. Then the last point is essentially for me to trace them so that it is again more of a closed shape. So you have your lips, essentially you can erase these ones already. So that's how you would create the basic shapes for some of your lips, nose, and mouth in some of the views that you have seen right here. So this is quite, it's one enough isn't really quite enough for you to be able to understand all of these things. That's why it's very much important for you to also look at the module, do it yourself, even though if you're just reading the module, or if you don't really do it, you won't be able to understand it fully. Also, it's very important, what right now, for the sake of like accomplishing your quiz, what's important right now is for you to understand the basic shapes and the proportions that make up these different views and these different body parts. So with this one, that mostly comes along with practice, of course, pero it's quite sufficient for you to kind of know muna kung ano yung basic shapes and kung ano yung proportions na kailangan ninyo. So with this one, we kind of overextended a little bit. Yeah, matatapos na rin tayo, sorry. May questions po ba tayo? So if may questions tayo, please let me know na lang sa may chat ninyo sa may messenger so that we're not overextending. And with that one, I'll see you next time. I think, yeah, this is our last synchronous learning session for the year. So ang next synchronous learning session natin would be on January 4th, but your module 3 will be sent to you by December 18th. So with that one, thank you so much for coming in for today. Have a happy holiday ahead. And with that one, goodbye everyone. I'll see you next year.